Good morning, everyone. Great to see you all. Let me begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land on which we gather, the Ngunnawal people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to our special guests as well, the Minister for Science, Industry, Technology, Karen Andrews, our panel members, initiative partners, friends on the line, friends in the room. Great to see you all, this very exciting initiative. I'm Kieran Gilbert from Sky News, and I'm delighted to be here because I do think that this initiative has great excitement to it, it's bold and it's worthy. This is the Minderoo Foundation's Fire and Flood Resilience Initiative, the blueprint. So Minderoo Foundation made the broader commitment at the start of the year in the face of this calamitous situation we face, the disaster of the fires. Today, we get the detail of that vision. We get the blueprint for this resilience initiative. To kick things off, let's start with Andrew Forrest.
Thank you for joining us in this beautiful room and online in particular. It's so important what you're now considering. I was involved deeply in the terrible tragedy of 2009 and we worked there for 2 years to help those communities recover. It was a painful, painstaking exercise. To see it all happen again, so much worse, is just a travesty of us not having the foresight back then, nor the technology back then, that we have in this room now. We must band together, Australia, we must band together, fellow leaders, to ensure these tragedies of fire and flood stop inflicting the terrible damage to our countrymen and our nature as has been. We're now releasing, ladies and gentlemen, the Fire and Flood Resilience Blueprint and our first mission, the Fire Shield. We're pulling together with 47 partners, including governments and companies, to make all of this happen. That number's going to grow, and I'm very grateful you're all part of it. Fires and floods, as the climate changes, are going to become more prevalent. We can save Australian lives by the thousands and save Australian wildlife by the billions. Please join us on this Fire Shield mission. Thank you for your attention. I hope you have a fantastic launch.
Now, Adrian Turner is the CEO of the Minderoo Foundation Fire and Flood Resilience Initiative. Adrian spent the best part of 2 decades in Silicon Valley, was the founding CEO of the CSIRO Data 61 initiative, well equipped in terms of the professional experience, but the personal resolve was forged, I believe, and I think Adrian will elaborate on this, but faced a fire at his brother's property in the Southern Highlands, 30-metre flames. The RFS brought body bags the next day because they didn't think anyone survived. But they did. Adrian Turner is here as the CEO. Please put your hands together. Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks. Thanks very much. And really appreciate everybody being here and particularly online. I'd like to introduce the Honourable Karen Andrews, the Minister for Innovation, Science and Technology. We're thrilled that the Minister is able to join us this morning, and I know from spending time previously with the Minister, she's passionate about the role that science and technology can play in this problem space. So, Minister. No.
Okay, while we stand by for Karen Andrews. Gentlemen, how are we looking over there? Any progress?
How's that?
Good. We're good.
Excellent. Excellent. Isn't technology fabulous when it works and when there's a good operator behind the system as well? Look, my apologies for that. It is a pleasure to join you. I'm in isolation, in quarantine in Queensland on the Gold Coast, but I'm delighted to be able to be joining you this morning to announce the release of the Minderoo Foundation's Fire and Flood Disaster Resilience Blueprint. So obviously I would prefer to be there at the National Press Club in person, but I'm glad technology, now that I have sorted it out, allows me to take part in today's proceeding. So this blueprint represents a huge amount of work by Minderoo and its impressive list of partners. So well done to all of you for progressing such an important document, especially in these very challenging times. I especially want to acknowledge Adrian Turner and his team and their determination to deliver. I've met Adrian on a number of occasions now, including at both Bushfire Science Roundtables I hosted earlier this year. Adrian, it's great to witness your work come to life after months of dedication and effort. Well done. Minderoo demonstrates what a modern philanthropic organisation can do. The difference that Minderoo is making to Australia and society as a whole can't be overstated. From delivering almost 200 temporary houses to mobilising skilled volunteers and providing a tools and equipment library, Minderoo has already done so much for people in bushfire-affected communities. Can I also acknowledge the many industry, research and community partners there today? Your continued work with Minderoo Foundation is critical. Your engagement means Australia is best placed to build enduring resilience to bushfire and other natural disasters. Our land of droughts and flooding rains has been the stuff of poetry for over a century, and this year we saw it in full force. With the most recent bushfire season still etched into our minds, we suddenly find ourselves preparing for the next one. In some areas of the country, the bushfire season has already started. It makes the release of this blueprint especially timely. Now, Minderoo describes its vision as audacious, and that sends an inspiring message about its 2025 goal. Audacious is good. It allows you to dream big and deliver bigger. It allows us to all work towards changes in how we respond and adapt to bushfires and natural disasters. And the vision in this blueprint will help Australia to be the global leader in disaster resilience by 2025. And that's a goal we are all working to. As you may be aware, the Prime Minister, Minister Littleproud, and I recently announced $88 million to increase funding for critical research into bushfires and natural hazards through a new world-class research centre. Part of this centre's vision is to drive change through collaboration. By bringing together first responders, emergency service agencies, researchers, industry and the broader Australian community, the centre aims to deliver real outcomes. I look forward to Minderoo and the new centre working alongside each other to bring about the next generation of innovative solutions. These networks are vital to addressing and meeting the challenges of complex issues such as this. Now, part of the excitement is today's launch of its first, Minderoo's first national mission, which is the Fire Shield. Now, Fire Shield asks the question, what if a fire never became a disaster? And it's a worthy way for Minderoo to kickstart the missions. Minderoo's missions are ambitious, they set a high bar, but reflect the faith that you as partners have in yourselves in meeting the challenges by 2025. Now, I wanted to finish by emphasising the role Australian research organisations have long played in bushfire response, recovery and resilience activities. Australia has a long history of world-class research, from our new research centre to our universities to the CSIRO, a long-standing and much-trusted scientific voice in Australia. It's been engaged with bushfire prediction models since the 1950s and provides much-needed expertise on fire behaviour. But it's not just the CSIRO. Geoscience Australia provides vital information used to make decisions on the ground, including location information about population, businesses, infrastructure and critical assets. ANSTO, our nuclear science agency, holds one of the world's most comprehensive fine particle databases. These individual organisations are doing great work in this space, but many of their achievements are possible because of their ongoing collaboration. I firmly believe that Australia will continue to be a world leader in bushfire and natural disaster research over the coming years. Organisations such as Minderoo and the new National Research Centre will make collaborations even easier, and this will allow us to draw on our experience and expertise to deliver innovative ways to be more resilient. Thank you again for inviting me to this important event and to help launch the blueprint. I can see the hard work that's gone into it over the past few months, especially with the additional challenges of COVID-19. It's been great to share in this moment, and I'll follow your progress with great interest. Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Minister. We really appreciate it, and we wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment of collaboration. It's going to take us all coming together to solve these challenges. I'd just like to say a few words. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the brave men and women who make up emergency services across the vast country of ours, and we have some of those in the room today. You're the heroes. You put your lives on the line time and time again, and most of you don't get paid to do it. You do it voluntarily, you do it for nothing more than the love of the community and wanting to make a difference. The work you've done and continue to do is not forgotten, and we're eternally grateful for your service. We're here today, and what we're here today to announce is for you. It's for fire-ravaged communities across the country, and it's for all Australians who have had their hearts touched by fire and flood. I also want to call out the first-line responders in the US. They're dealing with devastating fires that we experienced last season, and I've personally driven across a lot of those roads, those communities, and through those forests, having spent 18 years over in that part of the world. The devastation being seen right now in the west coast of the US is a stark reminder that what we faced last summer and what we'll continue to face if we don't take action, we need to drive change. We need to go to the source. We need to lift resilience to fire and floods by reducing risk, a function of the hazard, the potential exposure to the hazard, and system vulnerabilities, whether it's landscapes or communities or other. Back in January, as Kieran said, I almost lost my life in a fire, fighting a fire in Kangaroo Valley. The experiences that day and throughout my career have led me to this point, and I'm determined to ensure that no one endures the feeling of being helpless that my brothers and myself felt as we grimly defended the property over 6.5 hours, facing more than 30-metre walls of flames. But my story is, there's thousands of stories having been in fire-affected communities over the last months, and our first responders do that day in, day out. To all of the communities still heartbroken and dealing with the physical and mental scars of those horrible days, I want to let you know I feel it too. I also want to acknowledge and thank the National Bushfire Recovery Agency and Andrew Colvin, who's with us here today, and the incredible depth of MBRA's coordinated responses to those dark times, as well as ADF, who stepped up at a critical time and provided support. But let me address the elephant in the room. Yeah, we've set an audacious goal. It's audacious. We've got an audacious task ahead of us. But where would we be as mankind without thinking audaciously? What's ever achieved by aiming low? An audacious vision requires an innovative approach. And for that, we're drawing inspiration from the Apollo mission from the 1960s. What was thought impossible 10 years later was possible. Minderoo Foundation and our amazing partners gathered here and online today recognise the importance of step change thinking The nature of climate-induced threat is extreme and will not get there in increments. We need to rethink. We need to change the game. I'm not here to say it's easy. It's not. It's going to be difficult, and if it were easy, it would have already been done. The solution will be multifaceted, and exponentially improving technology will be our friend every step of the way, whether it's detection, monitoring, sharing of information or response. In the 18 years I spent in Silicon Valley, I lived up close to the evolution of the internet, from a tool for email to an infrastructure for instrumenting and interfacing with the physical world. We underestimate how fast technology moves. But any work to lift resilience must be community-led and involve place-based investment as well as systemic investment. I just want to finish by thanking a few people. I want to thank Andrew and Nicola Forrest for allowing me the privilege to lead such an important mission for the country. Andrew and Nicola are remarkable human beings and passionate Australians. They saw what happened last summer and knew it couldn't happen again. I also want to thank the incredibly talented Minderoo team, who have a strong track record in delivering multidisciplinary initiatives of the sort of scale that we're talking about here. Importantly, I want to thank our incredible partners, many of who are in the room and online. Andrew said 47 partners in the time from when he shot that video in the last days to today. We're actually sitting at 52 partners. And I can tell you it's flipped in the last 4 weeks, from us reaching out to people reaching out to us, not just from here, but from around the world to get involved. This group has been meeting every 2 weeks over the last months to get to this place, to co-create the blueprint and the missions. We look forward to next steps together, and we also call on others in Australia and around the world to reach out to us to get involved. Our vision is audacious. We want to reduce harm caused by fire and floods by harnessing the collective power of communities, industry, government, the not-for-profit sector, and of course the research sector, to lift Australia to be the global leader in disaster resilience for fire and floods by 2025. Today we launch Fire Shield. It's our national bushfire moonshot. Together with the best minds from Australia and the world, and fueled by goodwill, ingenuity, persistence, and a big dose of pragmatism, we'll work relentlessly to achieve our objective and stop fires from ever becoming disasters by being able to put out any dangerous fire within an hour. Thank you.
Australia's Black Summer. An estimated over 1,500 bushfires. Over 18.9 million hectares burnt. Over 3,300 homes destroyed. Up to 3 billion animals killed or displaced. And tragically, 33 lives lost.
Every year we get faced with devastating fires and floods, with scientific predictions that they're only going to increase in number and severity. It doesn't need to be this way.
What if a fire never becomes a disaster?
What if every community had the skills and resources to reduce the risk of disaster and bounce back stronger? What if our natural environment could reduce the risk of dangerous fires?
We can reduce harm caused by fire and floods by harnessing the collective power of communities, industry, government, not-for-profits and the research sector, coming together to lift Australia to be the global leader in fire and flood resilience by 2025. Such an ambitious national program can only be achieved through deep collaboration. And we're appreciative of the time and goodwill shown by our partners, including Emergency Services Australia, to co-create and co-develop the blueprint and the missions. out of the devastating last fire season, we can rise together.
And now we have our panel discussion. We have Adrian on the stage. Let me introduce the rest of our team today. We've got Andrew Colvin, National Coordinator, National Bushfire Recovery Agency. Andrew, if you could join us. Jennifer Westacott, Chief Executive of the Business Council of Australia. Anna Maria Arabia, Chief Executive of the Australian Academy of Sciences. Stuart Ellis, Chief Executive Officer at the peak body of the Emergency Services, and Kelly Byer-Roseman, Chief Executive Officer at Optus. Thank you all so much for being here. Andrew Colvin, let me start with you with the fundamental question which underpins this effort. Why is building resilience into our disaster response framework so important in this country?
Kieran, thanks for the question. And as my first opportunity just to speak, can I say congratulations to Minderoo, Adrian, to you and your team, Andrew and Nicola, Forrest as well. It's already been said this morning, why shouldn't we be bold? Why shouldn't we be ambitious? Because that's the only way that we will force a change, and probably a step change. And having seen the devastating effects that we know that fires, flood and other natural disasters have, we should aim high. So why resilience? Why is it important? I think we've already heard, and you really only need to look at that video that was just played to understand why it's important. But I'm sure the economists amongst us could give us a economics grounded answer about the return on investment, and Minderoo have talked about between $4 and $11 return for every dollar invested in resilience, and I'm not going to argue that. It's probably, if anything, it's a conservative figure. But it's also the right thing to do. We know that bushfires, we know that natural disasters are becoming more intense. We know that our communities today are so interconnected. Our communications, our lives are so connected to each other that the effect of a natural disaster, the effect of a flood or a bushfire is so complicated. It takes a long time to recover. It's expensive to recover. So why shouldn't we be spending more effort and energy to work out how do we make communities more resilient? How can we prevent? How can we reduce the risk? But also, if we have to be honest and accept that in our country disasters will happen, how do we make sure that we can bounce back better? So how can we absorb the impact of the disaster greater? How can we come out of it stronger than we went into it? That's why resilience is so important.
Jennifer, any reflections on that?
I think that's absolutely right. I think, can I also add my congratulations to Minderoo and to Adrian and the team. But look, I think we know that the science tells us we're going to get more of these events. They're going to be more extreme. We already have a long history of them. So the challenge, I think, is how you get ahead of it. And how does business, government, the community play a role together? What are the structures? Minderoo is an important structure, Biz Rebuild's an important structure, Andrew's body's an important structure, so that we get a sense of planning ahead, giving people confidence, involving communities, and starting to get ahead of these things as opposed to chasing them after they've happened, and making sure that we're taking that preventative action. And I think some of the things in Fire Shield will have this kind of confidence building effect. And this sense in which we know we're going to have these events, but how do we make ourselves more resilient towards them? And we can get back to this later, but I would like us as a country to do a national resilience plan to really, as a country, get ahead of this and look at the most vulnerable communities, the most vulnerable assets, and actually sort of start planning together on these.
Adrian, can you give us a bit of more detail on the blueprint itself, the mission structure? You touched on Fire Shield, but give us a bit more detail in terms of that mission structure out to 2025.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to the panellists as well for making the time today. So what the blueprint is, it's an evidence base. We've drawn on the best research here and overseas. Everything we've done and proposed is grounded in research and a strong evidence base. But what we've done is we assembled this group. We said no one group can solve this problem alone. So what we did was we brought together these 52 partners, and it's 6 of the top 10 ASX companies. It's global philanthropies. It is government agencies, and thank you to AJ and his team who have been with us meeting every 2 weeks as part of development of this. And it's the research sector. and the research sector is going to play a critical role. And each group brings a different perspective to the problem that's allowed us to develop this plan of action, which is the blueprint. And we looked at the system breaks. We said, where are things breaking down that if we only focus on those, we drive a step change outcome? And the model is proven. The model, so the most famous example is the Apollo mission. But our own Department of Defence has a program that's modelled in a very similar structure. And in fact, Karen, who helped stand that up, is now leading the missions with us. So I'm really optimistic that we're going to drive the outcomes here.
Jennifer, from a business perspective, what is the appeal of the initiative where you see philanthropy, government and, you know, corporate all brought together?
Yeah, look, I think it has to be that partnership. I mean, I think people often forget that business is the community. Like, you know, whether it's the guy from Coles whose house got burnt down, who went and opened the shop so that people could get their groceries, or small business. So I think that's the first really important message. Business is the community, and it's in many cases the lifeblood of the community. But then in terms of some of the partners that Adrian's talking about, and we, you know, some of the best digital companies in the world, you know, we can bring a lot of those digital skills. Business really stepped up during the fires, you know, whether it was cash, whether it was banks deferring loans, whether it was energy companies, telecommunications companies. The challenge is to coordinate for impact. And that's the kind of role of things like Minderoo, Biz Rebuild, we've done, the AJ's group. You know, we've got to get a kind of focal point so we can work more constructively together in much more rapid time and really get that on the ground action. But I think business has also got tremendous skills to bring in terms of problem solving and research, and how do we bring some of the tools of modern business to making ourselves a more resilient country.
Andrew, your thoughts on that?
Look, I agree 100%. I mean, one of the things that's the starkest observations to me since coming into this role is that the government has a lot of big levers that we can pull. We have policy levers and we can facilitate things to happen. But on the ground, it's places like business, it's our volunteer networks, it's our philanthropic organisations who step forward and are able to bring a traction that government sometimes has trouble getting. You know, in the Commonwealth in particular, we sit at 50,000 feet from a lot of the problems, and now we've driven through the National Bushfire Recovery Agency a far more victim-centric focus, but we've done that in partnership with business. We've done that in partnership with our NGOs and our charities, because they're on the ground each and every day. And some of the most amazing stories that I've heard of people, particularly in those first days and weeks, have been the tradies, have been the local Bunnings store, not to mention any one or other, but who just did amazing things for people. And no one organisation, no one entity is going to save this. No one level of government has got this completely worked out. So we have to work together.
Anna Maria, from the Academy of Sciences perspective, I guess it's so important that all of this be driven by the evidence as well. And that's why you're involved.
Absolutely. Could I also start by thanking the Minderoo Foundation? Andrew and Nicola Forrest really stepped up here. I think increasingly we're seeing in Australia philanthropy deploying risk capital in a way that governments can't necessarily, but they didn't have to, and yet they did, and they assembled Adrian and his team quickly, and I think that's to be commended. The other thing to be commended, of course, is, as you've just said, that evidence-based approach. We know we're going to get the best outcomes if we're able to look at what the evidence is showing us and inform our decisions that way. So the Australian Academy of Science is involved because we're able to bring together the best minds, not just in Australia, but across the world, to this task. And there is no doubt that there will be research gaps that we unveil as we move along, but the current knowledge we have, the technology that's under development, our work with industry is absolutely critical. So having the convening power that the Academy has, we're neutral, we're able to resource researchers and research from any field when it's needed, both nationally and internationally, and that is a really important aspect in terms of finding the solutions and realising the missions.
And Adrian, I guess that's your challenge, isn't it, to bring the talents, the knowledge across the board. You know your expertise, but then others like those that Anna Maria represents have a broad experience as well. Is that your sense of it in your role now?
It is. On the community piece, just for a moment, the other element of the blueprint the other element of the work is Minderoo immediately stepped in and mobilised 2,000 volunteers, funding Blaze Aid and other groups like that. Minderoo immediately stepped in and manufactured 250 temporary accommodation pods that have been deployed out through New South Wales and South Australia. That ground truth data, that community up approach is something that we're also adopting throughout this. But the beauty of Minderoo in this role is, first of all, we're not an operator, so we need to work hand in glove with emergency services and government organisations. Secondly, we're not a research organisation, but we can fund research. We're a true meritocracy in terms of bringing the best and brightest for that particular class of problem. And what we've done collectively is define the work streams, and then we'll put out calls and we'll go into networks and we'll find the best people to solve the problem.
And Jennifer, your organisation has been directly involved in that Biz Rebuild. Talk us through that experience.
Yeah, so what we decided to do was to try and coordinate the business effort a bit, but there's a couple of really key things that Biz Rebuild was trying to do. The first thing was businesses are often the glue in a community, and what we've seen in many other disasters, and Sir Peter Cosgrove, who chairs our initiative, has been crucial in managing some of them, is that many people can't get their business up and running again, and so they exit the town, and so you lose sort of some of that community vibrancy. And so, you know, we decided to get this initiative going, which will become a permanent feature of the Business Council. A couple of really important things that we were able to do, Kieran, that I think are worth saying. The first is we really got on the ground quite quickly, as did Minderoo, to listen to people. And that's, I guess, one of the core messages today, is that, you know, every community is different, every business is different, every family is different. Crucial to kind of listen to people, and we kind of worked out what do people need. And the second thing we did was to do some of the little things that people needed. I mean, what really amazes me in the learning from this is it's often the little things. So it's giving someone the tools to get back up and running. So a little company called Beach House Stairs in Bateman's Bay lost all their tools, were about to lay off their apprentices. Through Biz Rebuild, Bunnings gave them all their tools back. Then we got this pop-up mall going at Mogo. Lisa Paul, who's here today, went down and talked to people, and they said, what do you need? We need to get our businesses up and running again. So we got ATCO to put in the demountables, and you know, we got them all up and running again. So it's really worth a look. And little things like a voucher to get some business advice. Use your local accounting firm, your local law firm, to get things up and running again. And then now we're on to some of the big things. So community halls, really interesting in the video. You know, how do we make community halls part of the modern resilience story? Because many of these halls, as you know, were built in, you know, the 1920s, 1950s and 60s. They're not really fit for purpose to both allow people to kind of have modern kind of community engagement, but more importantly, to be a place of shelter, safety, communication, coordination in a disaster. So we're now in the process of rolling out some of these big projects. And then things like, you know, people need things like the bus to get going again. So we've just funded a bus. And the other really important thing was to coordinate what business is doing. And I won't, you know, that's kind of well documented in our stuff. But, you know, everyone wanted to help. And the challenge is how you kind of focus people based on what communities want, and that's the other kind of advantage of what we've been doing. And then working with Mindaroo, particularly in Kangaroo Island, where we've been working together, that I think has given a real action focus. And the final point, to Andrew's point, is that we're able to do stuff really fast, like give people a voucher, no forms filled out, no, you know, obviously there was kind of due diligence, but, you know, you need a voucher for tools, you need a voucher for your new laptop, here it is. That really gives people a kind of sense of confidence.
Let's bring in Kelly Byer-Rosemer. And Kelly, Optus, one of the first partners to sign up to the initiative. Why is it important to Optus?
Thanks for having me on the panel today, and apologies for not being there in person. But I think from our perspective at Optus, we really believe in building resilient communities. And we feel we have a very strong role to play in helping ensure that that happens. The New South Wales bushfire inquiry concluded that the service most valued by the community was telecommunications during the bushfires. And we understand that we play a critical role in making sure people are connected to the people that they love, to being able to call emergency services, to be able to access information about what's safe, where they can go, where to get supplies, what's open. All of that relies on the communications infrastructure being up. We're one of those businesses that really is on the ground during the bushfires, doing everything we can to make sure that our towers are secure and transmitting. And even though we have 8,000 towers across the country and only 7 were burned in the last bushfires, we also lose sites when the power goes out. So it requires a lot of coordination on the ground with all the fire services, with the electricity community, with the government, to make sure that we can be in there refueling, putting in diesel generators, and in some cases bringing in SATCATs, which are small satellite replacements where a tower is out. We're also on the ground in the communities, in the temporary centres that get set up, handing out SIM cards and phones to people to make sure that they can be connected. So we do have the first-hand experience of being part of those communities, really trying to respond to what is happening on the ground. But we do believe that in line with the whole mission of the Fire and Flood Resilience Plan with Minderoo, that preparation is key. And we think we can play a role in assisting that, whether it's working as we are now with the ACT Rural Fire Service as a first step of deploying cameras, remote cameras and sensors that are all connected and can feed information for early detection, using drones or satellites, leveraging some of our emerging 5G capability to make sure that into the future we can play a critical role in ensuring that preparedness, giving people early warning, and making sure that together with many other businesses we can anticipate and do everything we can to keep the communities safe, resilient, and able to respond. So it's a real honour for us to work with the Minderoo Foundation on this.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate that. Let's go to Stuart Ellis. And Stuart, with the Australasian Fire and Emergency Service Authorities Council, you basically are the conduit, bringing all the agencies across states and jurisdictions, linking the emergency services together. How do you reflect on this initiative and what role it can play?
Yes, thank you, and good morning to everyone. We're very pleased to be involved with the initiative and on the panel this morning. AFAC's the National Council for Fire and Emergency Services, and so it does have a coordinating role. And during the fires last summer, we moved over 7,000 firefighters between states to provide a surge capacity. I think one of our reflections is we're probably using the wrong term to a degree. We refer to natural disasters. Well, they're disasters when our resilience is insufficient to manage them. And I think one of the really exciting ideas from the Minderoo initiative is let's try and minimise the opportunity of disasters. There are natural events. These fires and floods have happened and will continue to happen in Australia. But if we can bring together our resilience and build our resilience, and particularly from a fire and emergency service perspective, our response, and really hone that and make that as sophisticated as possible, then natural disasters will be far less, and there'll be natural events which we'll be able to respond to quickly.
Let's take a look at the Moonshot Fire Shield. Have a look. very exciting, the Fire Shield initiative, this mission. Adrian, further to you and your words as the CEO of the initiative, how do you see Fire Shield rolling out? Best case scenario.
So we're designing the program. What we've done is we've looked at fires and the life cycle of fires in discussions and in an evidence-based way, and said there's 4 areas that if we can make progress against detection, so more rapid detection, monitoring, so that includes prediction and spread modelling. So the team I led before at Data 61 developed, for example, the Spark fire spread modelling. But what we saw last season was, because of the drought, because the fuel load was so heavy, because of the intensity of the heat, the fires exhibited different characteristics and some of the models broke down. So there's more work to do in terms of modelling and spread prediction. And then information sharing. So a lot of people here have a big role to play, including Optus and others, in making sure that the right information gets to the right people at the right time. And just in terms of step change thinking, projects that we've already kicked off include mobilising the Australian Citizen Science Association to find ways to have everybody that has a cell phone potentially being able to play a role in a next generation situational awareness infrastructure. And there's a whole lot of second and third order problems that need to be solved for that to be a useful proposition. So getting the information to the right people at the right time is critical. And then rapid response. How do you rapidly respond? And there we're going to be exploring everything from the use of autonomous systems, piloting things. We're in discussions about using some of the test facility up in Dubbo to be piloting things under supervision of RFS and emergency services, as well as even novel fire retardants, looking at that. And we, in the last month, to give you a concrete example, we underwrote a competition with the Australian Space Agency and the New South Wales government. And what we did was we mobilised 4 teams and paired up a data scientist with a team that understood fire behaviour and spread. And we gave them real satellite imagery, and those teams had 2 weeks to come back with novel ways to deal with remote vegetation and fuel load monitoring, including moisture content in landscapes, ignition to spread models. And as an example, one team came back and they're looking at fire behaviour. When does a fire become an extreme fire? And they're looking at smoke plumes and the shape of plumes and the way smoke's moving. So in 2 weeks, 4 teams made a step change by pairing up the data scientist with the group that had the domain expertise. And we need to do more of that.
Kelly, to you, this is exactly what you were talking about, isn't it, in terms of the role that organisations like Optus can play and you know, front and centre, that sort of capacity in terms of Fire Shield and what Adrian's talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we want to do everything we can to support all the different experiments, because it is about mobilising all the citizens to be able to report what they see, making sure there is enough connectivity, that information gets to the right person at the right time, and that there's information sharing and everyone can feed it into the models and know if they have to respond quickly. And it's leveraging all the assets of the company. I mean, we operate the biggest fleet of satellites covering Australia. There's even a possibility that you could use satellite detection to find fires early on. So anything we can do to speed the time of detection and then get the information to the right places, even enabling drones to go out early, it all relies on that connectivity being there and being ubiquitous. And we're ready to step up and play whatever role we can to support our communities and make sure, as was said earlier, that these natural weather events don't turn into disasters.
Anna Maria, can you elaborate on where you see science fitting into this mission model?
Absolutely, what Adrian has said is absolutely critical. We can't get to 2025 detecting fires with binoculars, using fire retardants that are not good for the landscape and for biodiversity, and trying to use communication technologies that have been disabled because they've been fire affected. And there are teams already available, and by bringing them together, we're able to make connections with existing data as well as advancing additional data. Absolutely underpinning all that is the standardisation of data collection. Part of the blueprint, and it's very exciting from a scientific perspective, is the Disaster Resilience Data Collective. What that effectively means is that if we can get the data standards right, we are collecting data, analysing it and sharing it in a way that is standardised. Not only does that help us with coming up with solutions across state and territory borders, but it allows us to share solutions internationally. We're able to learn from the Californian wildfires, they're able to learn from us, Brazil and other countries. That standardisation is absolutely critical. Wherever you have data scientists, wherever you have data, you have scientists behind it, so you're bringing together ecologists, meteorologists, soil condition experts. If they are collecting data in a way that has standards behind it, we are able to make best use of it. That is a really critical component of the blueprint and of achieving the missions. And whatever we can do to support that is critical. Just finally, the Royal Commission showed that there were apps and communications technologies across state and territory borders that were not compatible. So imagine being a community in a border town and not knowing which app to look at or having to look at 3 or 4. Imagine then being able to collect data in a way that was standardised and delivering that, bringing it together, analysing it quickly in real time and delivering that. It empowers people to act.
Stuart Ellis, can you reflect on those points regarding the data issue, but also more broadly, what difference do you think Fire Shield can make to how emergency services are linked and coordinated at the time of a crisis?
Well, I think one of the real strengths of Minderoo is it's acting as an accelerator. I mean, there are a whole range of initiatives that we have in place, and we have this Royal Commission and other inquiries looking at issues, but Minderoo can operate outside the constraints of government. And I think this initiative around the fire prediction, which Adrian referred to, Spark, is something which CSIRO and AFAC, the fire authorities, are partnering in. And to have Minderoo come and support that, it will really accelerate the deployment of that fire prediction model. And people may not be aware that fire prediction modelling is a critical element of how we both deploy our resources, but also how we keep the community informed. And it requires a huge amount of science, a huge amount of computing power to play these models numerous times and to ensure that they're appropriate. And this initiative to progress and accelerate the deployment of Spark will be tremendously beneficial to the fire services, but also to the community safety.
Andrew Colvin, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think why shouldn't we be excited by some of this? We know that the data exists. We know that there's smart minds out there that can help us predict. So why shouldn't we be trying to set those aims high? I mean, it was a very clear message to me as we travelled around some of the fire-affected communities about inconsistencies in data management, inconsistencies in information that was provided. And I guess it's a product of the fact that I'm coming at it from the Commonwealth level, that I look at it from a national perspective and I can see those inconsistencies and I can see where we can improve. So I think we should applaud the initiative. We should be using data. We should be using science. We should be using business to come together with government to work out exactly what we can do to predict better and therefore to mitigate the impact.
We've got a couple of journalists in the room. If you'd like to ask questions, please just come to that microphone in the middle of the room when you're ready, and I'll go to you for a question from the floor. Adrian, Jennifer, and whoever else wants to dive in on this question, but we've touched on it a little. Adrian, you've discussed it already in terms of emerging technologies, but can you just elaborate on that space? What is happening right now in terms of early detection that excites you?
Look, it's a combination. So the other thing that's exciting here is think of the second and third order consequences and potentially the economic spillover for solving these problems. If we've got a data commons that's linking government data with industry data, think about the situational awareness, but think about the ability for businesses to make better decisions, better planning decisions. We had the good fortune of the data science lead for one of the big reinsurers actually embedded in our program over the last months. And over the last months, we also built, under the direction of John Sukar, a tool, and together with the Bushfire and Natural Hazard CRC, we're taking 70 data feeds. We're able to make assumptions about different risk types and how important or likely they're going to be. And the tool dynamically stack ranks every single LGA, local government area in the country, from least resilient to highest resilience. So that becomes a decision support infrastructure for place-based investment. We did that in 6 weeks by working with partners who are able to unlock data and make it accessible. But then think about the second and third order consequence of if we can better understand landscapes and get higher resolution understanding of landscapes, and we can do that on an ongoing basis, you could actually unlock an entirely new accounting system, natural capital accounting, and you could create new economic incentive structures for active land management. You could also unlock social impact investing and have that become viable, where today it's not viable because it's too expensive to do the baseline measurements of before and after. So this is about fires. This is about stopping fires. But if we get this right, this first part right, it's a game changer. It's a generational game changer for Australia. I genuinely believe that.
Anna Maria, any thoughts on that? Because the data sharing story is obviously central to that too.
It's central to it. Most of what Adrian's talking about is either ready to go or close to going. So often it's about bringing together existing data and technologies. The sort of satellite technology we have at the moment, things like infrared radiation detection, thermal detection, will allow us to spot fires a lot earlier. So as we saw in the video, you can get to them sooner. But underpinning that is being able to bring all of that data together. We have really good standards in Australia. We can build on them. Through the Academy of Science, we're able to access CODATA, which is the International Science Council's data committee. These people work on data commons around the globe all the time. There's a lot of work that we are drawing on at the moment. It's not that far away. In fact, there is a lot of low-hanging fruit from my perspective. We just haven't had the national effort, I think, to bring together all of those data sets and all of that technology and research that is currently available, let alone the investments needed to fill the gaps where those gaps exist.
I think the other point about the data and the stuff that is being done, I think the biggest challenge going forward is confidence and empowerment of people and empowerment of communities. You know, as we kind of come into the summer now, what do people need? Well, they need confidence. What are they going to need going forward? They need confidence. We need to think that these communities are confident about people investing, confident about setting up a business, confident that issues can be managed, confident about levels of risk. So I think the kind of beauty of the data point is that obviously allows you to do all the management that we've talked about, but the second order effect is to build confidence and to build community capacity and community empowerment to take control of some issues and not feel, oh no, here we go again. More, we know what to do.
Let's bring in one of our journalists here this morning, Pablo from SBS.
Hi, Pablo Vinales from SBS. Just in the aftermath of the bushfire disaster, the Prime Minister said that the government's climate change policy would evolve. We're yet to see what that actually means, but in terms of this strategy, where does climate change action fit in this as opposed to, I guess, sort of action on the ground?
Sure. So we're treating climate change as a boundary condition for this program. So we believe that climate is changing and believe in climate change. The evidence suggests that these bushfire and natural disaster events are becoming more extreme and more frequent. Certainly they're shifting around as globally weather patterns are shifting around. And what we're focused on is, okay, the events will happen. They'll likely be more extreme and more frequent. How do we respond to that? How do we become more resilient to them? And it's not in any way diminishing the need to go upstream, but the scope for this program is resilience.
Andrew, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think we know the climate's changing, and no one is denying the climate's changing. I think, in fact, the Prime Minister stood in this room and talked about the climate is changing and how do we respond to that, how do we adapt to that. So I think that's where the strength of this program, the strength of the work that Minderoo are doing has come into it. We need to understand that the impacts of climate are getting harsher on community, and I guess to Jennifer's point as well, it's about leadership in those communities. How do we empower them to get that leadership to deal with what is a changing environment?
Pablo, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Now, Andrew, still with you, and I'll get Stuart's thoughts on this as well, but what is, I guess it picks up on what Jennifer was saying. What's happening right now to make Australians and communities feel safe ahead of another fire season?
Yeah, it's a good question, Kieran. I mean, we're heading into another high-risk weather season, and Stuart will have some thoughts on this as well. I mean, I come at it from a recovery perspective, but I'm not immune to seeing what's going on from our responders and our local government agencies as well. And there is a lot of community messaging out there about what do we need to do differently. And I think there's a lot of anxiety in the community right now, particularly our bushfire-affected communities where I'm focusing my attention, because the first sign of smoke, the first sign of a fire will bring back memories that are very real and very much at people's front of mind. So there's a lot of reassurance about the fact that we are better prepared this year. There's a lot of effort and energy in terms of how do we make sure that our communication to the point that we heard from Optus is more effective this year if we can learn those lessons. So I think there's a lot of effort and energy at all levels of government and non-government organisations as well to make sure that we're prepared, but we also have a COVID-19 environment which we have to make our plans in a COVID-safe way. So there's added layers of complexity for this coming high-risk season to what we've probably had before.
Stuart, your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is, I think people are more aware that this is a shared responsibility. We can't just rely on emergency services or governments, but it's communities. And I think what Minderoo is doing with this fantastic initiative is demonstrating that it is a shared responsibility. I think the other thing which people want to be reassured by is practical actions. They can see things being delivered, and Minderoo's been able to do that. Some of these initiatives that we're talking about with this fire prediction capability is something that emergency services will see, and it cuts across the normal procedures of government inquiries and recommendations and goes straight to practical delivery. And that's something which is very appealing, and I think for communities would be very reassuring.
Adrian, if we go to, let's look at 2025. That's the goal. A lightning strike causes a fire in the New South Wales Victorian border region. How does Fire Shield kick in?
Well, I'd argue that Fire Shield would kick in before that, and we'd be looking at that weather pattern, and we'd be mobilising resources ahead of time because we would have built an understanding of that terrain, and we would have and fuel load and adjacency to community, and we would have mobilised assets to be closer to the event in case there was ignition.
Do you think that, given the scope that we saw at the last summer, it felt like we were chasing our tail, basically? Is this is an effort to get ahead of the events on each occasion?
Yeah, it's about containment, but it's about early detection and response to try and contain before the fires get away from us. And look, the experience down in Kangaroo Valley, that was an extreme fire event, and no sane, a member of RFS or any other emergency services would have stood in front of that and tried to fight that fire. It was do what you can to get out of the way and let it pass over. So we're also pragmatic that these events will happen, and I'm sure, over the years, fires will continue to get away from us. But by having a different approach in terms of thinking, and it's really, look, the goal is audacious, but by being so audacious, we're hoping that it's going to prompt a step change in the thinking for people to step out of the existing paradigm and say, well, why does it have to be that way? The way we've done it, why have we, there's good reasons why we've done it, but it's just, again, that underestimating how quickly technology is moving. It's moving exponentially. I mean, you think about, communications, for example, and Kelly mentioned satellites. I mean, you look at the cost of putting a payload into space and how the economics are completely reshifting and being reframed, because SpaceX said, well, why do we have to throw away the rocket every time we put it up? So that's what we're hoping to drive here, is a step change. And we've got, I mean, it's a privilege to work with the organisations. It's a privilege. In the 5 years back in country, the CSIRO is an amazing organisation, Data 61 too. There were 680 PhDs in that organisation that I was leading. The horsepower, the intellectual horsepower in this country to solve this problem exists, and the links to California. And what we really want to do as well is convince a sister program to get stood up in the US so that we have 12 months of continuous fires to be pilot testing, learning, sharing knowledge with the right sort of data standards in place as well.
Jennifer, you touched on it, I guess, in a way earlier, but if you can elaborate a bit on that point, because Adrian's talking about that, international link. Your focus earlier, you were talking about a national cohesion, better leadership. Can this be the catalyst for a better coordination and leadership?
Yeah, look, I think people have done an amazing job in managing what was an unprecedented event. So I think there's a couple of things that we've learned, I think, that are really important. My view is that we should make Andrew's body a permanent body, because we know we have these disasters. We know that we've got to recover, and we know we've got to do that as fast as possible and work with communities as quickly as possible. And trying to start that each time we have a big disaster is probably, there are better ways of doing that. The second thing we'll be doing is making this rebuild a permanent feature, so the business has got a place to go straight away to say, how do we have an impact? Minderoo will be another crucial source of getting some continuous structures in place. And then the other thing we've suggested in our submission to the Royal Commission is, I think we need sort of like a permanent toolkit of policy responses, one of which would be some form of job keeper for people. Because what we noticed on the ground, what really mattered to people when we surveyed people was money, was cash. They just lost their cash flow. So they may not have actually lost their business, they just lost anyone coming in. So how do we kind of have this menu of things that we can quickly deploy based on the community's needs? And then finally, this National Resilience Plan, which particularly builds on the stuff Minderoo are doing in terms of high-risk communities. How do we make sure we prioritise Fire Shield and other resilience pro-actions in those areas which we know are vulnerable? And how do we get sort of like ahead of that through some kind of national resilience plan? That's the sort of suite of things I think we should do.
Anna Maria, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we know that for every 10-minute delay we have in detecting a fire, it spreads 1,500 square metres. That's a lot. And we know that if we get to a fire within 1 hour, we can put it out, the large sort of fires we saw over the last bushfire season, within 14 days. If we wait 72 hours, it takes us 47 days to get on top of them. We saw that and we felt that during the bushfire season. We felt we were always chasing our tails. Why can't we get on top of this? Why don't we have enough equipment? They were just too big, too ferocious, too intense. Being able to detect them more quickly allows us to get in quicker and stop the fire becoming a disaster, which is the objective of the fire shield. Importantly, we speak about California, but there are fires all across the globe. One of the things the Academy of Science did immediately after the Australian bushfires, and we received lots of expressions of sympathy and offers for help from our counterparts across the country, across the globe, was identify fire experts in academies around the world, and particularly in those countries, and there are many of them, it's not just the US and Brazil and others, where there is fire expertise. So we now have this cohort of people where we could be running these experiments all of the time. So extending that globally is really important, and connecting the globe that way is really important. We get in quicker, whether that's here, California, the Amazon, wherever it is, and we stop it becoming a disaster.
Stuart, is that something that appeals to you? I mean, we obviously see the firefighters helping in the United States at the moment. They did for us during the crisis. Is that sharing of knowledge and technology something that can be grown, in your view?
Absolutely. And it's vital. It's vital in the way we manage fires now. Certainly from a national perspective, it's vital in moving resources around the country. And when we exhaust those resources, it's vital that we bring in international support. And with that support is knowledge, experience, which really aids our development of firefighting, our understanding of firefighting around the globe. So North America is where we have particular connections, but as we were just saying, Europe as well, Portugal and Spain, those Mediterranean countries experience very similar fire seasons to us. And so I think this is an international problem, there's no doubt about that. And the more we can share our experience, our information, as well as our firefighting support, it's going to benefit everyone.
We've been talking a lot about technology, Adrian. I want to ask you about something which I know has been a discussion in climate talks, and that is Indigenous land management and fire management. Is that something that you'll take on board as well?
Yeah, but what we'll do is this whole program is not, let me be really clear, Minderoo is not the hero here. There's 1,000 heroes that's got to come together, groups have got to come together to solve this problem. And our approach is that Minderoo doesn't need to lead. What we've done is collectively created a framework and said, these are the work streams, and if we can make progress against these, we drive a step change in resilience. And I think that's a great example where Minderoo shouldn't lead. What Minderoo should do is to support groups that that are implementing those practices today and team up with Anna Maria and the research community, and if there are gaps in terms of evidence base and research, help accelerate closing those gaps. But yeah, we do think that Indigenous land management practices have a role to play, and a role to play in certain situations and landscapes, and that's the other thing here, is that there's not one answer to solve. It's a multifaceted problem. So it is, we've talked a lot about technology, we've talked a bit about the built environment, we've talked about, we haven't talked as much about the social environment, and at the end of the day, technology exists and we're pushing on it to help people and to help protect our landscapes and our wildlife. And so it's, in a sense, the technology is there to serve us. And one of the most devastating things is you go into these communities and just, the communities are still suffering. You look at the call volumes to organisations like Lifeline. You look at suicide rates in some of these communities, and you layer COVID on top of it. And that whole social dimension is something that we also want to pay attention to, making it easy to get access, making sure that there's dedicated caseworkers working with government so that people can get support and help, and then where we can, helping to accelerate thinking around smooth handoff within the system. So it's the economic environment, it's the built environment, it's the social environment, and it's the natural environment, and we have to tackle all four.
We're almost out of time. I want to thank we've got 260 participants online with us this morning, so thank you as well for joining us. We'll finish with some closing remarks from everyone, if I can, just to wrap up on your thoughts. Jennifer, if you could kick off, and then we'll go around for your final thoughts before we close.
Yeah, look, I think we've got an enormous opportunity here, and the Minderoo work gives us that platform to give communities confidence, to give the country confidence, to make sure that we bring those four things that Adrian talked about together, because people have been traumatised in a way that I think people have been genuinely shocked by, not surprised by, but really shocked. And when you get in on the ground and you see the trauma that people have experienced, that they're still experiencing, the lack of confidence, the fear they have. This is about giving people hope. It's about giving them confidence. It's about also us as a country taking control and us giving communities control.
Kelly Byer Rosemarin at Optus, your thoughts?
At Optus, we stand for optimism and choices. And we think that this is a perfect example of collaboration and coming together across government, not-for-profit, research and business to create options for communities and to fuel that optimism. And we always say it starts with yes. And here it really does start with us saying, yes, we can detect fires within an hour. Yes, we can get to them very quickly. Yes, we can share information. And if we keep having that attitude, I'm confident that we will set the benchmark for how to prevent fires and floods from becoming natural disasters that affect communities. So really encouraged by the work that's happening and more importantly, by what's about to happen as we all commit and say yes to making this happen.
Stuart Ellis.
Look, I think we need to really leverage off this opportunity to accelerate. And that's really what Mindaroo's offering us, an opportunity to accelerate the initiatives that we discussed this morning. There's a huge amount of research and operational planning that is already in place. But what we have the opportunity to do is to progress and to leap forward using technology. And, I think that's, for me, that's a once in a career opportunity to do that. And with the collaboration of Minderoo, I'm really keen to make it successful.
Anna Maria.
As a scientist, I need to correct the record. Earlier I said that if we get to a fire within 1 hour, it lasts 14 days, that's 14 hours. So I feel I needed to correct the record there. But for closing remarks, I think what this shows us is that evidence-informed decision-making is absolutely the way we need to move forward. We've seen it with COVID. We make the best possible decisions when they're informed by evidence. The other thing that the Minderoo Foundation's work is able to show us is that we know climate change is causing a greater frequency and intensity of fires, but this is not bigger than us. We can do something. We have the tools, we have the know-how, and we can bring those together to deal with the impacts of climate change and the way it affects our communities if we take an evidence-informed approach.
Andrew Colvin.
Yeah, Jennifer used the word hope. Kelly said optimism. I think they're great words to describe the situation that we're dealing with and we're confronting. It's a shame in many ways that we often need tragedy to create change. So let's not miss the opportunity that we've got now. We can't describe a better environment for us to want to learn from than 2020. It started with the bushfires at the back end of 2019. It tested our frameworks, our very tried, true and relied upon frameworks for dealing with natural disasters in a way that we had not imagined. And we shouldn't forget the magnitude and the scale of the disaster that started 2020 and now where we are with a whole range of other things that have happened. So let's not miss the opportunity, and I think it's fantastic that people like Minderoo and Adrian and Twiggy have stood up, as have many others, to say this is our opportunity for step change, so let's embrace it.
Adrian Turner.
I just want to thank everyone again that's got us to this place. Enormous amount of goodwill, partners across every stakeholder group that's been discussed. And just if there's a thing that I can leave you with, it's the absolute conviction that the team has and this working group has to make progress against this mission objective, to solve the challenges that we've talked about today. We're committed. I know Andrew and Nicola are committed. Even in the last hours, I've got communication from Andrew reaffirming the commitment. So we're out to make it happen, and by making it happen in this environment against this set of challenges, I also personally want to lead by example in showing the country that there's a better way for us to solve other wicked challenges in bringing together groups in this collaborative way under emissions framing and emissions model. So we're all in.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you to everyone on the panel and for everyone in the room. And here's Nicola Forrest to say thank you as well.
Hello, I'm Nicola Forrest, co-founder and co-chair of the Minderoo Foundation. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, all of our partners who have joined with us for our Fire and Flood Resilience Initiative. It is your courage and determination, and of course your expertise, that collectively we are going to be able to make Australia the global leader in fire and flood resilience by 2025. An audacious vision requires an innovative approach. Let us rise up together and be brave. Australia is counting on us. Thank you all so much.
Thanks again, everyone. Have a lovely day and all the best to the initiative, and we hope and pray for its success. Thanks.
Thank you.